All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Earlier this week at the ACC's annual kickoff event in Charlotte, North Carolina, Conference Commissioner Jim Phillips preached about unity from his 17 football schools. But I'm here to say it didn't take long for that message of unity to be dead on arrival. Multiple reports today have North Carolina looking for a way out of the Atlantic Coast Conference with their sights set on the riches that is the SEC. Now, if Carolina were to attempt to leave its conference home for the last 72 years, they probably look to do it in 2031 when the exit fees to leave the ACC would drop from 93 million to 75 million. And North Carolina can thank the recent legal battle that Florida State and Clemson put on the ACC for that, as they've been looking to get out of the conference's grants of rights. Now, this is a bombshell that's not going away because the fans are going to continue to be flamed, or the flames are going to be continue to be fanned for the next several years. And the only way that this fire is going to be extinguished is if the SEC flat out says they don't want North Carolina in their fray. But should they? At the moment, the SEC appears to be content with 16 members, okay? And you have to wonder if this juggernaut of a conference wants more freight. Now, football wise, North Carolina is not considered to be a powerhouse. And football wise, North Carolina is not going to make the SEC better. However, we know that North Carolina has a solid academic reputation, and also their basketball program's history is second to none. And just for the sake of argument, right here, can you imagine having North Carolina and Kentucky in the same basketball conference? Two of the bluest of blue bloods in the world of college football. Now, another question is, does the SEC want to poach the ACC, or would the SEC wait and see if the ACC were to implode? Now, either way, the next round of television deals, which for the most part, I think they're going to be coming around the pike in like 2031 or 2032, they're going to be interesting. Why? Because we already know that the media deals that the SEC and Big Ten are going to receive are going to be even more enormous than what they are currently receiving, which is only going to raise eyebrows from schools around the ACC who are going to want more. Now, hypothetically speaking, could the ACC survive losing North Carolina? It would be tough if it were to happen, because you think about North Carolina. And when you think about North Carolina, the first thing that comes to mind is Duke. And the basketball rivalry on Tobacco Road between these two is second to none. And honestly, at the end of the day, when you think about the ACC, the first thing that comes to mind is Duke and Carolina. That's it. They are attached at the hip. But at the end of the day, if this were to happen, and that's a big if right now, we don't know, but buckle up, because North Carolina leaving the ACC has the potential to be the next seismic shift in collegiate athletics. Because, of course, if Carolina leaves, would they leave by themselves? I don't think so. I mean, you've already seen Clemson and Florida State duke it out with the ACC. Could North Carolina State be in that fray? And even when we heard the first reports last year about Clemson and Florida State, going to court, to try to get out of the grants of rights with the ACC, there was about half of the conference that was sitting back and looking and saying, could we be a part of this as well? So it's one of those right now. It still sounds like the ACC is a house divided. So we got to wait and see what happens. But nonetheless, a Carolina departure from the ACC could also affect multiple conferences around collegiate athletics. For me, most notably, I'm looking at the rebuilding Pac 12 as well as the basketball driven Big East. The reason why I bring up the Pac 12 for an example, currently, the Pac 12 wants Memphis, okay? And of course, we know that Memphis wants the Big 12. And of course, the Big 12 just told Memphis, no, thank you. And we all know that by hook or by crook, Memphis is going to get out of the American Conference on the first thing smoking. Now, if the ACC, for example, were to lose a North Carolina, would that be the opening for a Memphis and a Tulane possibly to leave the American in order to join the ACC? I'll tell you like this: unlike the Pac-12, if that was the case, I think the ACC would pay the exit fees to the American for Memphis, and I think they would definitely try to jump on that, hypothetically speaking. All right. Also, would the ACC take a stab at a Connecticut to try to lure them away from the Big East? Now, we know that UConn is not a football powerhouse. Currently, they're an independent, but their men's and women's basketball programs are. And at the other part of this equation is unfortunately bringing in Connecticut football wise does not improve the ACC's football resume. And honestly, the same could be said for the most part when it comes to Memphis if you're the ACC. But hypothetically speaking, like I said the other day when I was talking about Memphis, it would put them back in the same conference with Louisville, which is in itself an instant rivalry. Now, nonetheless, if North Carolina were to leave the ACC, could the league be able to weather the storm? I'll tell you like this. At this point, if, and I mean if, North Carolina were to leave, it wouldn't be until 2031. So it might still be too early to tell because we're talking about 6 years from now. But that could happen. 6 years could be here rather quick, okay, before you blink. But nonetheless, recently, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips has had to get creative in order to save his league, which has included California, Stanford, and SMU, all who joined the ACC last year, taking a reduced cut in revenue for their first several years in the league. And guess what? Phillips is going to have to do something like that again in order to keep the people who are looking to leave or want to leave happy. Because if not, the ACC is on the verge of finding out what the original Big East, the Big 12, the original Big 12, as well as the original Pac 12 conferences all had to find out the hard way. And that is at some point, it's darn near impossible to keep everyone happy. Now, the ACC probably thought, hey, we're in great shape when they got Miami, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, and Virginia Tech to all leave the original Big East. And then when Maryland left the ACC for the Big Ten more than a decade ago, the ACC was also able to get Louisville on board. But with each conference around college football not being on the same foot financially, it's tough to keep every school happy. And these schools are always going to begin to explore their options. Again, I cannot harp on this enough. The potential of a college basketball world without Duke and Carolina and the ACC together. Because my thing is this: it's like, and I'm hypothetically speaking right here. Let's say that the SEC decides to take a North Carolina. Would they want Duke as well? I mean, Duke, their football stadium is small. Okay, I mean North Carolina's football stadium isn't the biggest either, but nonetheless, when you think about the AC or the SEC rather, you think about college football cathedrals for the most part, and how many people that they seat: Ben Hill, Griffin in Gainesville, Bryant Denny in Tuscaloosa, uh, Jordan Hare and Auburn, Tiger Stadium with LSU. Now, of course, DKR Memorial Stadium in Austin. We can go right down the list. Okay, but these are huge venues. I'm not sure if Duke would fit in football wise if you didn't want to separate Duke from North Carolina. But of course, basketball wise speaking, of course, it'd be a slam dunk. But nonetheless, um, it's unfortunate because of the business aspect of collegiate athletics because rivalries have come and gone, and there are plenty of rivalries that have gone the wayside due to realignment in college football. You think about Oklahoma, Nebraska. That was once upon a time the big game in the Big Eight, and then even still, they didn't meet all the time when they were both in the Big 12 conference. You think about Georgetown, Syracuse, basketball wise, what it meant to the Big East. And of course, yes, these two schools have the ability to still meet up on the hardwood, but it's not the same. And I could say that for multiple rivalries that have fallen by the wayside due to realignment. At the end of the day, each round of media deals and realignment always tends to lead to the destruction of another power conference. And for me, the biggest question is going to be, can the ACC survive if North Carolina and others were to leave? And it's going to be tough. Another question is, talked about the Big Ten, talked about the SEC, but if Carolina were to leave the ACC, could the Big 12 benefit as well? I think this is something that you really got to sit back and watch because, hypothetically speaking, again, if Carolina were to leave, they wouldn't leave alone, and they're going to take other schools with them. Okay, the ACC is going to try to survive. They're going to try to probably, pull in some schools, maybe from an American, maybe try to get Mountain West, Pac 12. We don't know. Okay, but is it going to be enough to keep everybody else there happy? Again, the biggest thing for me is, does the SEC want to expand? Okay, and do they want a North Carolina in their fray? And of course, North Carolina wouldn't come alone. Now, geography wise, North Carolina does fit into the SEC because they're literally right there. Okay. They're the neighboring state north of South Carolina, of course. So that's an instant rivalry. They share a border with Tennessee, another instant rivalry. And again, like I said before, the North Carolina Kentucky basketball aspect is definitely would definitely be must see TV. Mario Stanfield, how you doing? Good evening to you. You're saying North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Um, it's going to be interesting to see who else wants to be on board with North Carolina because we already know Clemson and Florida State want to leave. Okay, but it's one of those where the SEC has already said they don't want Florida State. Most importantly, Florida has said that they don't want Florida State. So it's one of those where I like just thinking about it from that standpoint. If the SEC doesn't want you and the Big Ten doesn't want you, going to the Big 12 would only be a lateral movement for those schools. And at the end of the day, they're looking to get more money. I think what has hurt the ACC in this is that long term grants of rights that was basically locking in schools until 2036. However, all of these schools signed it. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the other big thing is basically nobody wants to be the first conference to agree to a new media deal because you got a feeling that somebody else is going to be able to give you more. That's going to be the biggest thing from the ACC for the ACC the next time around. Because again, like I said before, they're not going to get the same amount of money that the SEC or the Big Ten are going to get. Okay. So it's still going to be a handsome sum of money that they're going to get. Do not get me wrong. It's not peanuts. But how do you keep everybody happy if people are looking at what the Big Ten is getting and what the SEC is getting and they're saying, why not us? But again, the $1 million question is going to be, does the SEC want North Carolina and possibly another ACC team? I think the ACC is finding out the same thing that the Big East had to find out a while back. You think about Big East football, all of those years They wanted Notre Dame to join their conference. And of course, Notre Dame joined the Big East for every sport except football. And I think that was one thing that hurt the Big East. That's something, in my opinion, that's hurting the ACC now. Notre Dame remains a football independent, along with their affiliation with the ACC. Notre Dame is very smart about it, and you cannot blame them. Notre Dame plays 5 games against the ACC every year, football wise, and they get a cut of that revenue. And if Notre Dame were to play a 6th game against the ACC, then they would have to be a member of that conference. Notre Dame is not, and I repeat, not joining a conference for football anytime soon. Why? Because we just saw it on full display last college football season. Each round that Notre Dame was able to advance in the college football playoff, they got more money. Unlike Ohio State or any other school that advanced in that college football playoff, Notre Dame did not have to share that money with anybody else. Ohio State had to share that money with the Big Ten, everybody around the Big Ten. Notre Dame didn't have to do that. So when it's all said and done, do you think Notre Dame is going to join a conference and try to help out the ACC football wise? I don't think so. And I think at the end of the day, that is something that is going to hinder them going forward. You're saying that the ACC needs West Virginia. Well, I, for the longest time, said geography wise, West Virginia and the SEC or the ACC made a lot of sense from a rivalry standpoint. You brought up Virginia Tech. Of course, Virginia Tech and West Virginia have had a football rivalry for years. Pitt and West Virginia, you think about the backyard brawl. They've started to reignite it, but of course, once upon a time they were both independent together before joining the Big East. But with Pitt and the ACC and West Virginia and the Big 12, it just doesn't have that same sizzle to it. Yeah. Oh, listen, Notre Dame, they're going to get their cake and eat it too. That's at the end of the day because they are going to get that NBC money. Okay. And then on top of that, they're going to get their cut from the ACC. And then, of course, with this expanded college football playoff, it makes it easier for them to get into the playoff. And again, the more you advance, the more money you make. And Notre Dame doesn't have to share that with anybody. So from that standpoint, I simply don't blame them. But if you are the ACC, this is not the drama that you need because Jim Phillips just kicked off your week of events for your media coverage leading up to the start of a new college football season next month. And these are questions that are not going away anytime soon. Okay, so now he's going to have to deal with it. His league is going to have to deal with it. But like I said before, the biggest thing that is helping Jim Phillips is that he has time. He has time, but he doesn't have time because 2031 is going to be right around the corner. He's going to have to get very creative in order to save his league. Okay, but the one thing aside from time that Jim Phillips does have going for him is the fact that hey, if the Big Ten or the SEC don't want North Carolina and other schools, where are they going to go? That's it. I think if the ACC, hypothetically speaking, were to go under, then I think the SEC and the Big Ten would go shopping, and then of course the Big 12 could be in that fray as well, and maybe the Pac 12. We don't know if the Pac 12 is back there off of life support. Maybe they find a way to get into this mix. We simply don't know. But at the end of the day, it's dog eat dog. For the ACC, they got to try to find a way to keep this ship together. Okay. And if not, if this ship starts to sink, it's going to be just like every other conference where it's going to be every school for themselves as everybody's going to try to grab onto a life preserver from another league. I guarantee you, the way that things are going, I'm not there in the ACC with these meetings, of course, but it sounds and smells like what some stuff that we've seen from other leagues before. Yeah, everybody is smiling, all fun and dandy, trying to make nice, but at the same time, they're walking right out of the door and they're trying to get a ticket out of there into another conference. Can North Carolina convince the SEC that they want to be part of their fray? Because if you're the Southeastern Conference, it's just like the Big Ten. You have the opportunity to be very picky right now. You think about it, the Big Ten had to be convinced about USC and UCLA. And I think what helped them out is the fact that they could then say, hey, we got the three biggest media markets in our back pocket if we bring in SC and UCLA, which they did. And of course, when the original Pac 12 went under, they took Oregon and Washington. The Big Ten could have had Stanford and Cal, and they didn't want them. Okay. And you look at the SEC, the last two times that they expanded, they brought in a Texas A&M and they brought in a Missouri to be with Texas A&M, but that was mainly about Texas A&M wanting more money, and of course, it helped the SEC because it allowed them to put their footprint into few the big state of Texas, where football, high school football, is king and it's very fertile there. And it's one of those where the SEC already recruited Texas, so now that made it a little bit easier. And then, of course, last time around, bringing in Texas and Oklahoma when they were looking to get out of Big 12 and they wanted more money, that was easy because Texas and Oklahoma are football brands. North Carolina is a basketball brand. Make no mistake about it. It's second to none. And when you think about North Carolina athletics, the first thing you think about is their basketball program. Like I said, they have history with their football program. It's just not on the same level as their basketball program. So I think in this one, the ball is in the court of the SEC rather, as far as whether or not they want Carolina and somebody else to come into their fray. I'll tell you like this: we got to pay attention to this because this is not going away anytime soon. But like I said before, both the SEC and Big Ten have leveraged themselves where they can sit back and be very picky as far as who they welcome into their party. But I guarantee you, like this, if North Carolina does leave, hypothetically speaking, and they take somebody else, another big player out of the ACC with them to the SEC, it's going to open up the floodgates and it's just going to be what conference is going to be able to survive. Because at the end of the day, collegiate athletics, it's like any other business. It's all about leveraging yourself, all right, and trying to build as strong a brand as you can possibly build. The SEC and the Big Ten have cornered the market as far as leveraging themselves. Um, the Big 12, okay, with Brett Yormark, they don't have the brands that the Big Ten or the SEC do, but Brett Yormark understands television markets, and that's why he's put his league in as many markets as possible to go out there and showcase what they can do. The Pac-12 is somewhat focused still on the West Coast, and of course, they brought in Texas State, and like I said, the Pac-12 is still trying to leverage themselves with possibly a Memphis or a Tulane. We got to wait and see what comes out of their battle with the Mount West. That's going to be another big domino right there. And then there's the ACC, who they brought in Stanford, they brought in Cal, they brought in SMU for the Dallas market as well. Uh, but how are they going to survive this? Because everybody's not happy, and I don't think everybody is going to be happy there. That's the big issue right there. You're saying unless they make a Big 12 East and West conference. Well, I'll tell you like this. We've seen it in recent years where football wise, they've gotten away from the divisional aspects because it's all about putting your best two teams into the conference championship game. But the other issue is there, you know, you don't want to be spread out all over the doggone place because it's not just about football. You got to think about the other kids who are playing in the non-revenue generating sports, and they've got to travel across country, and that's going to be tough on them. Just my thoughts on it. You're also saying just for the Mid-Atlantic market, plus there are wild card schools like Arkansas and South Carolina, mid-tier schools. Well, in the case of Arkansas, it was a perfect time for them as well as South Carolina to get into the SEC because if you remember, Arkansas, got off of a sinking ship that was the Southwest Conference, and of course, the first big blow to the Southwest Conference was the SMU being receiving a death penalty. Arkansas left rather, and that was the beginning of the end. We saw some of those schools, form with the Big Eight schools to make the Big 12, and then of course the Rices, the SMUs, and the TCUs of the world just simply got forgotten about for about a quarter century. And bringing in a South Carolina gave the SEC the ability to have two divisions, and of course that was the grandfather of conference championship games, the SEC championship game, and the rest is history. But of course, sometimes we've seen with some of these two division formats in these leagues where one division is, contender heavy and the other one isn't. Just ask Georgia how they beat up on the competition in the SEC East for many years. And of course, it was a little bit different for them last year when the SEC just went to a full 16 team format. But nonetheless, this issue ain't going away. Okay. And at the end of the day, it's all about the money. And these schools want what they feel is their fair share. And as long as it's not equal footing for everybody, there's always going to be somebody who's going to complain. It's like giving somebody two slices of pepperoni pizza and then you give somebody else a plain slice. I guarantee you that person with the plain slice is going to complain that they don't have two, and their one slice doesn't have pepperoni on it either. That's all it comes down to, the almighty dollar. And these schools are going to see and they're going to exhaust all of their options and resources to get top dollar for their athletics. So let's see what's next for the latest saga that is unfolding in the ACC. Just when Jim Phillips thought everybody was on the same page, just when he thought he was developing harmony after the whole legal battle with Clemson and Florida State, North Carolina, to quote the soon-to-be retiring Lee Corso, said not so fast. So let's see what's next for North Carolina. Let's see what's next for the Atlantic Coast Conference, and let's see what the Southeastern Conference has to say about the Tar Heels. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. And also, for all of you college football fans out there, start of a new season is right around the corner. And guess what? With that said, I've got a lot, and I mean a lot to talk about. So starting next Friday, going to be giving you my breakdowns and my previews for the upcoming college football season, which includes my top 25, as well as a conference by conference breakdown for the upcoming season, along with my college football playoff projections. So definitely stay tuned to this channel. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports, and you give me that follow, I will give you that follow right back. And the same can be said for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating groups going on social media. Mario, definitely appreciate you chiming in. Please do not be a stranger, because I definitely love what you had to say on this edition right here. I love like hearing, and you definitely know what you're talking about when it comes to the world of the ACC. So I, like you, am definitely going to be paying attention to see what comes down the pike from this. And of course, if Carolina gets out of there, who are they taking with them? And of course, like I said, that is a big if. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off. And I'm saying take care, and thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.